the fact that larger precincts are in fact more Republican. We don't, this is what we're looking into, we don't know. And we're doing analysis again between competitive elections and non-competitive elections to see if we have a differential, a different kind of profile. Because as soon as you have that, you know, competitive elections look like a flat line and non-competitive elections have an upslope, then you really got them. Then you've nailed them, because that shows a targeted pattern of manipulation. It's too early to tell, and I'm not exactly optimistic about being able to nail them down. But one of the things they found, and this goes back to 2012, was that in the Republican primaries, the cumulative vote share analysis was very strong, election after election, in favor of Romney, and to the disadvantage of the more radical Republican candidates. And what's in, I'm sorry?
Jump in and say, did you look at the Iowa caucus and something I heard about right after the Iowa caucus, that they were reporting the caucus votes, you know, literally hand counting.
Mm-hmm.
They were doing it wrong, and they gave the caucus to Romney, but they admitted 2 months later that Santorum won.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Not that we necessarily want to advance the cause of Santorum, but what that helps us do is pinpoint, which we've never really been able to do before, the likely source of where this manipulation is coming from. Because before, we really didn't know. Was it the corporatists? Was it the Christianists, the Tea Party people, whatever? It looks very much like it's Rove and the corporatists who are doing this. And that's a little helpful, because it tells us where to look when we're looking.
I was thinking that Eric Cantor was, I think, punished. And I mean, talk about a smoking gun. They're whatever happened to him, I mean, that was just phenomenally unexpected, and one of those margin of shifts that I think was jaw-dropping.
Absolutely.
And nobody questioned the primary where he lost to some,
to Bratz.
like some unknown. And yet he had crossed his, what was it, the congressional leader was going to run against him, and he had his legs cut off.
Yeah.
And I've heard that Senator from Nevada, the Democrat, Harry Reid, has kind of capitulated, and he was reelected in part by maybe some backroom deal where he, got to. I don't know. I mean, you don't know.
And there's a lot of that in politics. I mean,
yeah,
you just would like to see it more, out in the open.
Could you explain what it was for us about the Cantor?
Eric Cantor.
What was the name? What line? did it
One
cross?
thing, we had 3 people come in: Katie Hickok from San Francisco, Sharon Sweeney from Santa Clara County, Chandras from San Francisco, Janet Oakland, Alameda County, and Alameda. So the rest of them, we have had the pleasure, and we're from the East Coast someplace. Massachusetts. Yes, no, I was just joking. Go on.
Eric Cantor. I mean, that is in Code Red. Gets a very long footnote. I try to keep some of the stuff into the footnotes. He was up by 30% in the polls or something, and he lost by 20%.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a big one. Now, granted, it's not a national election, it's not a state election, but it was absolutely shocking.
It was
Again, a lot of it was on uncountable, unverifiable voting equipment. Again, there was no challenge. There are other elections which are kind of interesting for their absence of a challenge. I think the most egregious, and again, when we're looking for evidence that there's something wrong with this system, that there's manipulation, of course we look at statistical evidence, we look at all this, but you also look at the gestalt of the thing. You look at these incidents, things, that just don't make any sense. And one of the ones that always stood out was George Macaca Allen from Virginia, Republican senator. He was defeated by Webb in 2006 by virtually nothing, by less than 0.5%. Enough that put him within range for a recount. And he obviously wanted a recount because he had just been defeated. And he comes out on stage and, he's handed a piece of paper and he basically says, I concede this election. in a monotone without any affect whatsoever. I mean, clearly with a gun pointed to his head, figuratively and perhaps literally, to read this thing. That was the 50th Senate seat. That was the seat for control of the Senate.
Flip the Senate.
And the Republicans gave it up rather than face any sort of dig into the voting in Virginia, voting system in Virginia. And Virginia is one of it's gotten better now a little bit, they scrapped the win votes. And it's amazing because they have a Democratic governor who you would think would be absolutely resistant to any of this. McAuliffe, I mean, if there was ever an insider, it's Terry McAuliffe.
Yeah.
And yet they sponsored this research
Project, really.
project
Yep.
that exposed the voting system as being absolutely corruptible. I mean, just awful, and they came right out and said it. So it was rather surprising, rather shocking. But at the time, Allen conceded, and you looked at that and you said, whoa, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. That's the 50th Senate seat. These are Republicans. They never concede anything. Why the hell is he conceding this election? And Virginia was such a cesspit of vote counting that it could not have borne any sort of scrutiny whatsoever. So you see things like that, and it's very circumstantial as evidence, but it begins to add up. Machines where you push Kerry and it flips to Bush, that's part of the overall picture. There's something where the problem is that none of this stuff, gains real traction. A lot of it is here today, gone tomorrow. And I'll say it again, if it's deflated footballs, it's 2 months worth of national media attention. If it's, Bush flipping to Kerry or George Allen or election 2014, it's one article an hour. So the priorities of America as shepherded and as focused by a media system to which we have ceded a tremendous amount of authority and power are ridiculously inverted. And for a lot of people, those really are the priorities. I mean, there are probably, a fair number, millions and millions of Americans who really do care more about football and the inflation of those footballs than they care about who is seated in Congress or their state legislature or whatever. But there are millions and millions who don't. And they are not being amplified. They're not being heard. They're not being amplified. When they tried to gather in the form of Occupy, I mean, there were certain flaws to the conception of Occupy, but it was doing pretty well, was it not? I mean, it was approaching something that you might call critical mass. I mean, a kind of permanency. And the Democratic federal government and the Democratic mayors got together, and the police forces that have been militarized got together, and they wiped out Occupy in one weekend flat. Just like that, everybody was gone. And that was resistance in America. And that's a lesson that people learn. It's like, well, it doesn't work. And, that's part of the plan, is to teach us that it doesn't work. When 10 million people came out and protested prior to the Iraq invasion. And George Bush came out and said, well, that would be like making policy based on a focus group. And everybody went, shut up, go home, and don't bother me.
Page 16 of the New York Times.
Page 16, right. And the protest that we went down to his inauguration in 2000, the year, the original theft in the year 2000, and there were 50,000 of us in DuPont Circle alone, which was just one of the staging areas, and it was completely packed. Out, if you know Washington, D.C., these circles are big. They have an inner circle and an outer circle. It's packed way, way out. It's like a full stadium full of people. And we tried to march, and they crowd controlled us and atomized us and locked us up in various little enclaves and wouldn't let us out, dispersed everybody, blah, blah, blah. And it was only years and years later that the footage emerged of the egging of the limo and all that kind of stuff. We outnumbered. We finally got to the parade route. And the protesters outnumbered the supporters. There were about 2,000 supporters there. There were easily 100,000 protesters. Everybody got spontaneous. And you would never have known. We went home the next day. I looked in the Globe. I looked in the Times. Buried And, a few protesters were easily, handled and blah, blah, blah. So you knew right from that point, 2000,
Yeah,
this
it was
was
the
a
first
new,
coup.
new century,
Yeah, that was-
and this was, we're in for a rough ride.
It was in
hasn't,
Michael Moore's
Since
movie.
next time
It was in
we're back
Michael
here, and
Moore's
then
movie.
back to
Michael Moore,
Janet,
yeah, I
maybe-
saw the,
Yeah.
I
yeah.
want
John,
to
did
say,
you-
even after I saw the egging of the cars, I didn't know till tonight there were 50 or 100,000.
No, me neither.
I was there.
I didn't
We
never
had our
hear it.
signs and we were protesting.
Listen, okay, I got another thing to say. Who's gonna do it? Who's gonna change anything? That's what I see. I mean, it's in the hands of people who are not gonna change it. You can tell, we can tell everybody can listen. 59% can say they don't trust elections. We can make it 63%. Listen, 80-something% are against all these wars. 90% maybe, they don't even run polls anymore, are against all these wars. 95% must be against them giving contracts to Halliburton to make fighter planes that kill
Okay,
people.
we got it. Now, what's your question?
Even when we here's the question. Even when we elected Deborah Bowen, she did some of it.
Yeah.
So, when we talk about affecting change, even if Bernie got elected, who's there to
Back him up.
do anything, to make any government? I mean, to make any policy?
It would be.
You know what I'm saying?
Not gonna happen.
The only way you could get.
You got an answer for that? I mean, you're a woman after my own
I have
gloomy,
a-
pessimistic
I have-
heart, but I don't have an easy answer.
I have
But
I'm kind of, well, I still think this work is absolutely essential. The question of, what to do. And I've been
We're
involved
gonna
with
get
this.
on real practical steps about that in about 15 minutes here. You
Okay.
finished, Donna, and then
I'll just say really quickly, I've kind of gotten involved in a group that's based on Richard Wolff's economics, and he talks a lot about workers' cooperatives and,
You save that for our next.
and yeah,
Okay,
and that's
good.
one idea, and I'd be glad to talk with
Okay.
them. And
Okay.
Janet,
Okay, so that we didn't know about this 100,000 people in Washington DC doesn't surprise me at all because the corporate media is in bed with all the other corporatists, so they want to keep going, and so they
Right.
wouldn't let us know about these kinds of things. That's why I'm involved in Pacifica Radio, as is
Thank you.
Donald. Anyway, but
What's the Donald
Donald Goldmark.
Donald Goldmark.
Yeah.
Oh, hi.
Hi.
But anyway, so
I didn't know.
connection.
For
Yeah,
a
yeah.
long time, I sat next to you during your premiere, you didn't know.
So, I agree that the people who are in office are not gonna change, they're not gonna vote themselves out, they're not gonna, and I've been to so many demonstrations where people march to the federal building or about this or that and kind of yell at the building. Or even try to go into somebody's office as though that's not, and people meet with representatives, senators, whatever, and even ones who are supposedly progressive, it doesn't really do anything. I think the idea of circling the Upscan, is that wherever the
Upscan party.
county, is it county? I don't think
Precinct.
national it should be as low level as possible, and kind of building from that.
Yeah, that's where the ballots are. But I mean, just the basic concept of civil disobedience. Now, again, we were all, if we were born here, we were born into a democracy. We have every reason in the world to take it as a given, take it for granted, think that all we basically have to do is be good citizens and vote and, do our jury duty every now and then, and the rest will take care of itself. I mean, that has been sold to us. It's not historically accurate. democracies have been historically short-lived, fragile. We are already well beyond the lifespan of democracy. And of course, history itself is changing. There are different patterns that come with different epochs and whatnot. But a lot of things are constant, and that is that the people bent on dominion, whether it's because they're sociopaths or psychotic or existentially challenged, for whatever reason, they want power, they want control, they want to run other people's lives. Jonathan Edwards, you know, great song to that Sunshine Go Away. They've always been here and they'll always be here. And they're always a force to be reckoned with. And for a long time, you know, there was probably a bit more of an equilibrium. I mean, I don't think this country was ever a real beacon of personal, you know, rights and democracy, but it was at least, I think it was more on the right track than it is now. But the illusion has been so well maintained, and the educational system, which is a key part of this, is only getting worse in this regard. I have a daughter who's in high school, and this is in Brookline, Massachusetts, a very liberal town, and they cannot talk about anything that matters. In history class, there is no such thing as civics class. You know, it is basically learn how to compute, learn how to deal with, you know, media, you know, all this stuff. Everything's based on, you know, reading and math and science and all this stuff. And history is being, you know, reduced down to pablum. It's a liberal place. They cannot raise issues of current events in history. It's history. We're supposed to talk about history. We're supposed to talk about Harriet Tubman. We're not supposed to talk about
Black Lives Matter.
Black Lives Matter, exactly. And that's our educational system. And that's really critical. You know, but it's part of what's been sold to us. And that's why I believe, I mean, I'm not an optimist, but to the extent that I have some hope and, you know, something that keeps you from giving up, it is going to take a paradigm shift. And that paradigm shift isn't going to come from the powers that be in the system. It's got to come from the people, and it's going to involve what I call civil disobedience. It's got to involve circling those op scans or refusing to pay taxes, general strikes, the kind of things that were current in Europe up to a certain point, that we just find so alien to this idea that we're all supposed to just sort of get along. And if you go out and you look, you know, the street scenes in the prosperous, more empowered areas of this country, people seem to be happy. There is a lot of bread and circus out there. And they really seem to basically, you know, they got their iPhone, they got their sports teams, they got their whatever, their little, you know, relationships and, what do you call it? Hookups and all that. Sorry, I date myself. Yeah, meetups, whatever. I mean, they're happy. These people, you know, who is going to be the candidate who says, yeah, we're for this uprising where they say, you know, yeah, we're sort of happy, but we've been duped, we've been fooled, and it's pestilential. There is some pushback today. There are some people who are saying, you know, I'm not letting my kid have a smartphone at age 2. And there is some pushback, and we want to buy local, and we want, you know, it's a mixed bag. There is some pushback. It's really critical that these movements recognize how they can work together. I mean, Victoria Collier is somebody who is working hard on this. Progressive Democrats of America spawned a thing called People Demanding Action, and if they ever get their act together, you know, administratively and stuff, the idea is to link these groups, you know, Bill McKibben, who wants an environment, and somebody who says Black Lives Matter, and somebody who is for the workers in Wisconsin, and or against the TPP, and has these individual agendas. We've got to recognize two things. One is that we have more in common than separate. We've got to pull together. It's major. And we also have to recognize that if we expect change to come through the electoral process, and I was just down at the Left Forum in New York City, where there are some anarchists, and there are people who think we're going to have to wind up, you know, blowing everything up and having an insurrection. All right, if you're going by insurrection and blowing everything up, then maybe elections don't matter. But for anybody else who believes that at some point the TPP and Black Lives Matter and all these other things are going to come down to an electoral process, whether it's electing candidates or choosing through initiatives and ballot propositions, direct democracy, relatively direct democracy, whatever it is where votes are being counted, they have to understand, because they are motivated, these people are motivated to fight for this or against that this is central to all their agendas, that their agendas depend on this, and bringing these groups together, breaking through that sort of insularity of focus that often, takes place. And of course, we sort of have an insularity of focus as well, so there's a bit of irony in this, but recognizing that this is core, and they all have to begin to include this as part of their agenda and work together. That's what it's really going to take, and also work together and contemplate some means of action that so far to us have been off the charts and not within contemplation.
Anne?
I want to get back to something that you really dismiss, and I'd like to have a discussion with you about it because I think it's extremely important, and that's Facebook. I wanted.
I said I hate Facebook. I don't dismiss it.
I want you to hear me though,
yeah.
please,
Yeah.
because I think that you are missing something really, really, really important. I mean, I find, and I resisted it for so long and had so many ideas about it. Now I think it's just, I'm stunned by how cool it is. I'm stunned by the information that I get on it, the things that I learn, he's on it, Don, there's really intelligent people that are on my friends list. I have a lot of them all over the world. I get really, really interesting information. There's movements go. I think a lot of the anti-TPP thing came out from Facebook, and from people sending around information about it. You get information that you don't get in the media, and you get it through your friends, and they find, a clip about something, and it gets passed around and it spreads in ways that are. And if you want to argue about it, I'd be interested in hearing the other side of it. But I'm stunned by how informative it is.
Well, I think it actually missed my point, because my point was we're in violent agreement. Because what I said is that I hate Facebook, but I believe we're going to have to employ it and use it for exactly the reasons you're talking about, because it does have that reach. And my personal aversion notwithstanding, we have to use the tools that are available and effective, and that happens to be one of them. So I agree with
John's
you.
next.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to speak for a couple of minutes, because I want to try to connect some
John, by the
dots
way,
here.
is one of the two, if not the founder of this group.
I am the founder. And I still remember the night.
And I do too.
who is no longer involved. Not that he's burned out.
Touche.
He's with us in spirit today.
Yeah.
Always.
And it was standing room only.
John Gilmock.
First of all, I totally agree with you, Jonathan, that it's what I call identity politics that has really fractured any possibility of building a unified movement over the last 30 years. And I think it will come to an end, actually, sooner rather than later. I was at the Left Forum too. We didn't see each other there, it's fine. I was showing Heist, which I will give you a copy of tonight, so you can watch it on the plane. And
That's his movie.
yeah, that's what I occupied myself with. So I think there is a lot of inchoate movement that is happening on the ground across the country. How it will come together, we don't know yet. How many more left forums will have to occur, or how egregious the conditions will have to be. But there are people resisting. I mean, right now I'm involved with a group here in Berkeley fighting gentrification and fighting the building of skyscrapers in downtown Berkeley. Okay, that's happening across the country. Okay, and the whole issue of affordable housing has suddenly, risen to the surface. I don't think, I haven't thought, which is part of why I've not been active in the group for a while, that electoral politics is where it's at all. I think the movements have to come from the bottom up and are not concerned about elections in the near term at all, because we have a lot of work to do to connect all of these single issue movements that do not recognize that the unifying principle is who's running the show. Right? That's all. Who's running the show? No matter what the issue is, it's that same group who's running the show. And until we can make that just very simplistic concept sweep across all these single issue movements, we can't get movement. So I spend a lot of time thinking about this and talking with people about this. And Anne is absolutely right that one of the few remaining vehicles for us to communicate with one another, to galvanize and to mobilize, is social media. I know that from my own experience working on my own film and beginning to understand the power of these tools. And we still didn't get it enough as we released the film. But I can tell you, on the next one, we're already building it before the film is even shot. So that we will have a built-in audience and relationships going before the movie ever sees the light of day. So now we come back to, all right, how do we build this particular movement? Now you have a network of people across the country that you know, who are familiar with your work. And so you alluded to celebrity earlier. And I think we do need to, have a strategy of how we want to say that Americans have totally given up their right to know.
That's right.
And we can craft the messaging, make it really in what we call Americanese sports language, literally, so it's not just fair elections, it's transparent elections. And we show, saran wrap, you should look through the saran wrap and see what the goddamn numbers are showing. So, you have Congressman Holt, who's no longer a congressman, right? He was sort of with us. I don't know where he's at now.
Retired, yeah.
No, I know he's retired, but what's he doing? Could he be a spokesperson? Could he be one of those celebrities who would start to take this seriously or not? Hollywood, I don't know who's there, who might be. I can think of a couple, maybe. Danny Glover being the most logical one because he's the most radical of all the actors in Hollywood. Tim Robbins might be another, and there's a couple of others, and that's about it. We had a great movie in 2006. It was called Hacking Democracy.
Right.
That movie should get shown again. That should be one of the organizing tools. Get it on every local cable access television station across the country, which is a no-brainer, because they're desperate for content anyway. And the guy who executive produced it is Earl Katz. He's in LA. He has rights to it. Can be shown anywhere. Originally released on HBO. So, but it means putting together, a national network of people who are, beyond the issue of protesting and beyond the issue of, nibbling around reforms, but really going for the whole enchilada, showing we have a massive cancer in our midst, and it's gobbling us up very rapidly. And, you just have to use a set of the right frames. It doesn't mean people are going to wake up automatically, but in fact, all of the data you referred to earlier are absolutely correct. There are a lot of people out there